Good day, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the senior Huachuca Rocks mentors, Lieutenant General Anthony Hale and Major General retired Robert Harding, I would like to welcome everyone to today's Leadership Professional Development session titled ACM FI's Role and National to Tactical Integration. I am CW3 Frederick Joyce, President of the Huachuca Rocks chapter here at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. And on behalf of our chapter, I would like to welcome everyone here at the edge of the frontier and dispersed throughout the Army virtually at this meeting. Thank you very much for taking your time out of your day to join us today. The Huachuca Rocks Incorporated chapter is based out of Fort Huachuca, Arizona. We were established as an interest group in mid-2021 and chartered as an official chapter of the Rocks Incorporated on 30 January 2023. Our goal is to provide mentorship, professional development, and professional networking opportunities for Army officers. For Army officers, warrant officers, civilians, and cadets, with a particular focus on a variety of topics that include military intelligence, cyber, the Army of 2030, multi-domain operations, and other interest areas based on our members' inputs at the home of MI. Although this is the home of intelligence, we, Team Huachuca, make a specific point to ensure eligible and interested personnel, regardless of branch, understand that they are welcome to become members of Huachuca Rocks. We emphasize inclusion and we work hard to incorporate fellow officers and warrant officers, civilians, and cadets who are collectively focused on the challenging but rewarding work of investing in people. Before starting today's discussion, I would like to set a few ground rules for our session. First, if you have a question for our guest, we will set aside time after his comments to pose your questions to him. So please enter them in the chat and include your rank, if military, and your name. We'll do our very best to answer as many of your questions as possible within the allotted time. Second, please ensure that you are muted during the session. To introduce today's guest will be Colonel Jeremy D. Hartung, currently the Director of the Army Capability Manager Office for Intelligence Formations. ACM FI manages and coordinates capability development and user activities on behalf of the intelligence warfighting function. Colonel Hartung has served for over 26 years of service, and he has held various significant roles to include the Senior Intelligence Officer at the United States Army National Training Center, Division G2 for the 7th Infantry Division, and multiple overseas and combat tours, earning several awards to include 3 Bronze Stars medals. Colonel Hartung, thank you so much for joining us today. I will turn the floor over to you.
Cool. Okay. Thank you, Fred. And thanks to all for giving me an opportunity to give a little talk, because for sure, I know that the majority of the Army doesn't know what ACM FI is or what they do. And I'm really hoping to convert some more people to the thought that maybe I should ask ACM FI for help with some of the problems that we have. And on top of that, I think I'll get a chance to spout a little bit of philosophy about being an intel professional and a military intelligence officer, especially during the course of this talk. So thank you very much for that. And let's get into this. Let's see if I can share my screen here. Okay. So, folks, ACM Formations Intelligence is obviously the Army's centralized manager for capability development activities in support of all of our intelligence formations. So what does that really mean? Well, as most of you know, we are going into a new era in the Army. Now, I'm aware that it seems like we're always going into a new era, but there is serious significance to the end of the GWOT era and the beginning of our real focus back on large-scale combat operations. Overall, we're looking to build the Army of 2030 and beyond. So there's a new concept, we have new doctrine, and our leadership has all decided that we need new formations to support this new concept and new doctrine. And what does this really mean? Who are we talking about? Well, what we're really talking about are the IAW battalions, who are coming back after a long absence, and we'll talk about that a little bit here. and then fully new types of formations such as the MDEBs and other elements that are supporting the MDTF. So our multi-domain MICOs that are in support of our multi-domain task forces right now. Now, getting into the specifics of these different elements. So core IW battalions, obviously, if you're going to have a core, you're going to need a battalion to provide the intel support to that element, and that's really not a major change. Division IW battalions, however, are something new, or rather something old that is coming back. So we have not had direct support divisional IW battalions since I was a very young person in the Army. And the bottom line with that is we definitely recognize the need. If division is going to be your primary tactical echelon, your primary, the center of all things fighting in the tactical fight for a LSCO type of engagement, we need a strong division IW battalion. And there's some problems with that, though, that we'll talk about in a minute here. Next, MDEB MICOs. So your multi-domain intelligence elements within your multi-domain task force. Obviously, they have a unique role and one we haven't had before, which is providing intelligence support to these multi-domain task forces, which are concerned a lot with long-range fires, effects, things that, while we've always sort of done in the Army, we've never really had a unit dedicated to their support. And then, of course, our traditional TIBs, our theater elements that are always going to be looking at the big picture and essentially, if we were to follow the doctrine, essentially setting the theater for all of your other intelligence elements that are going to link into and then fight from. So what does that mean as far as what we actually do here at ACOM F5? Well, because we are looking at the integration of these new formations into the Army as a whole, we are going to have teams at basically every type of exercise, real-world deployment or real-world mission, warfighter type of event, experiment, and even your home station training, because we want to take a look very closely at what it is that you guys are doing and how you are employing the formation to see if we got it right. So here within the Intel CDID, we, of course, have the brightest minds around that looked long into the future whenever they came up with the concept for how these different formations should be. But there's a realism there, which is we have different commanders in different situations, and no situation that we ever put our folks in is exactly what we envisioned when we came up with the concept. So we see lots of variation with how different commanders are employing the formation, and we want to take note of that and then see if these things justify a change in the overall structure of the formation, or they're based on the particularities of one mission or one commando or something like that. So we're focused constantly on the .mil PFP integration of the IW battalion. So every single aspect of the .mil PFP, how is that looking as these commanders employ their formations? Integrations of their MICOs, especially the multi-domain MICOs in the MDTF, this is a unique one because multi-domain or MDEB battalions have a variety of different commanders, not always an intelligence professional in command of that organization. And then because they are so new, we have a wide variety of different means of employing these elements. And this raises big questions, i.e., so are the trends that we're seeing in the employment of these formations, are they based on the personality of individual commanders and senior intelligence officers? That's a real possibility because we've really only had about 2 to 3 rounds of command groups in these in MDTF1, and the other MDTFs we're really still talking about the first round, the first go around of command teams on this. So lots of data to collect on this. Then we have unique sections trying to integrate for the first time into our intelligence formations. And the best example of that is OSINT sections. So OSINT, while we've known forever that we really need to get this right in the Army, the fact of the matter is we have really only very recently started to employ these type of people as a section inside our formations. A lot of the work previously was done by contractors and other add-on support. So most of your IW battalions now have a 6-man or 6-person OSINT section assigned to them. And the big question is, how are these folks being employed? And before I get too cynical to start out with, I will say, though, Most of these OSINT sections are not being employed to do OSINT. Most of them are being employed to do lots of other things that are needed by the commanders. Warfighter exercises. So, folks, I know a lot of you have done a warfighter in the past, and that's great. And it's really the only training venue we have so far to really integrate your senior staff and your elements and your subordinate elements, albeit in a CPX type of environment. However, the structure of a warfighter is a carryover from the old GWOT days, in that if you take a look at the way the elements are laid out and scripted for your normal warfighter exercises, they are not the way we would employ them for an actual LSCO fight. And we'll talk more about that in just a second here. And then we also, at the ACOM FI level, are running different types of working groups to get into new and exciting things that have entered into our formations. So we have the DIMMing working group, the Data Integration for Military Intelligence working group, looking at big data and how the latest in big data tech will affect our formations themselves. So what do we see happening as we attempt to get these formations right at the same time as the technology on the data science, data analysis, data integration fronts are going at rocket pace? And then we have the Sci-Fi working group to look at the integration of signal, cyber, and intelligence folks into these formations. So as you probably know, as a Huachuca, most of you are Huachuca residents at least, there's a lot of overlap in what we do in these different elements. So we're using that working group to try and come to grips with where the points of friction are in these overlapping pieces. But overall, what we want to do is stay abreast of all the tech that is going on throughout CDID that we're looking to integrate in the next 5 to 10 years here. So things like Titan, CD1, Helios, AIDP, all these things. We need to ensure that the formation has the landing spots for these, that it is ready to receive and integrate this stuff into its mission. And there's a lot of different things that go into that. But one thing I'll say is there's a lot of overlap between what I'm looking at and what all the people that are particular capability managers for these individual pieces of tech are looking at. That's fine. Here at ACOM FI, we're trying to zoom out a little bit, look at it at a little broader perspective, and allow the other ACOMs and the other elements of CDID to look with a laser focus at that part of the tech, as well as maintain their relationship with the project office so as to ensure that when we diagnose something wrong, it can get fixed very quickly. Now, going back to the topic of formations, here is the reality of it. Well, when it comes to our formations, we have a very solid doctrinal base for how we want to do this. We really want each division as the primary unit, the primary echelon of LSCO, to have its dedicated IEW battalion, which will provide all the intelligence support for that division. And also, it will not be DS'd to the elements below it. So each division commander will have his or her own IW battalion, and this can be divvied out as they see fit to meet the mission needs. So not every BCT needs an element of this. Maybe he wants to weight his effort in one way or another. It's really up to the needs of the commander, and really that is what we need if we're going to fight successfully a LSCO engagement with our current doctrine. However, the problem with that is, while everyone acknowledges that, yes, we need an IW battalion in order to carry out a divisional mission in LSCO, the fact of the matter is, due to constraints, we do not have enough IW battalions, enough soldiers to make all these battalions that we need to support our doctrine, which has left us in an interesting situation where we've had to basically prioritize certain divisions over others as being the ones that will receive their full IW battalion, as opposed to a smaller GS MICO element. So if you look down in the lower left, right now, we have the full conversions complete for a number of our IW battalions, 502nd, 519, 303rd, et cetera, et cetera. These are the folks that are within the priority divisions or corps that will receive their full IW battalion with the new construct, to support LSCO operations there. In order to make even those IW battalions, we are forced to cannibalize the BCT MICOs. So in the near future, you will not have a dedicated BCT MICO supporting every one of your BCTs within a division, because those soldiers were forced to be removed and consolidated up the level to make the IW battalions. Most recent IW battalion we had activated, 302nd, back in the fall. They're currently sitting, they have a solid 70% of their people and equipment right now, but we'll continue to grow them over the next year. Next one on the block is 110th, so 1st Armored Division's IW battalion, which will activate this summer and then be building for the next year or so. But once 110th is activated, that is it. We are at the set right now that we currently can afford, which is 3 core IW battalions. So each of our cores, with the exception of 5th Corps, will have a full IW battalion. 5 division IW battalions, so that will be our priority divisions. Will all have their IW battalions. So 82nd, 101st, 1st Cav, 1st Armor, 25th. That's it right now as far as what we can actually afford to man. The other divisions will all have a GS MICO. So a GS MICO is a large MI company, only got a captain, no battalion staff, anything like that. It is a company to hold your intel soldiers and equipment for that division. So what we mean by this is they'll maintain your G2 elements as well as provide some analytical support. But what we don't have is any downward reinforcing capability out of this GS MICO. So by doctrine, you have to say that if you're a division, you will not, by doctrine, deploy with just a MICO. It is on the Army to provide you with a full IW battalion. That is our stated line. That's what we say, and that's all well and good, so long as we don't start to get overwhelmed with taskings for these divisions. So at the moment, already I see some a bit of strain in the IW battalions that we have already created, as a lot of them are getting tasked for different missions there and starting to get overwhelmed. And also we're starting to desync, because of the level of activity that we need in our IW battalions, we're starting to desync them from the activities of the Corps that they're supporting. So because certain elements have to be in Europe or other places all the time, they may not be available for the Corps level exercises of the Corps that they are supposed to support. This is a problem, and we'll talk a little bit about it. The other big problem that we have right now is we as an Army do not yet have the RStruct, so I cannot provide you with the predictability that you need when these big events are going to start to happen. So at the moment, all your BCTs still have their BCT MICO, and we have not yet formed those GS MICOs for the standard divisions. As far as a date on the calendar when we can say, hey, your BCT MICOs are going to go away at this date, and then they are going to start forming their division level elements, don't have that date. It'll be in the next 2 years, though. So as you folks start to go into your next leadership positions, just know in the next 24 months, this is coming for you. So be prepared. And then, well, actually, let's just get into the heart of this now. Okay. So with all that being said, what is the problem? Well, there are a lot of problems with this concept. So first of all, as I talked about a little bit here, we have lots of IW battalions which are being utilized right now to support competition operations. So think of your folks that have to go and deploy to Europe or certain places in Asia right now in support of not LSCO conflict, but the competition phase, let's call it, of LSCO conflict. This is a bit of a problem because the theater elements are traditionally the ones that are supposed to be handling a large portion of this. Your IW battalions that are assigned to your divisions and corps are there for the actual LSCO fight. Now, this is totally fine. They can support this. However, they cannot support it forever, which is why we currently have a deployment cycle issue to a certain degree with the limited number of IW battalions that we currently have available. Personnel shortages. Folks, there is no one in the Army that is saying that we should not have an IW battalion for every division there. Fact of the matter is, we don't have enough soldiers right now, and it was a negotiation game to get the IW battalions that we currently have. It's a problem. And while we're not doing too bad there, there's no silver bullet there that says we're going to get more people immediately so that we can form these formations up that everyone says are necessary. Retention and the formation and equipment sync. These two things are sort of tied. So while we're looking to build new formations, we don't necessarily have the equipment that we need yet for these formations, and getting that timing down so that we do not have soldiers that are manning a formation without the equipment that they were trained to be on is a bit of a problem. This is less of an issue with the intel, but as we look to integrate EW and cyber folks into our formations, for the most part, they are dealing with equipment that's either a generation old or a UFR or COTS government purchase there, not their actual program of record equipment. So this creates a real retention problem if you have soldiers that came in to do something specific, and yet we cannot give them any equipment to train on or to utilize, and yet we still want to retain them. So, yep, we couldn't give you what you need to do EW for the last 4 years, but I still need you to be an EW soldier inside an IW battalion. Please don't leave the Army. So far, our success has not been great on that. Equipment assigned or designed for the GWOT. Folks, I'm sure you are totally aware that the majority of the equipment that we currently have in our formations is not ideally suited for a LSCO type of fight. For the most part, we're talking about stationary stuff that emits, that has links that are vulnerable, and that was originally designed to stay on a fob or some kind of fixed and well-defended location. Yep, it's a problem. We are evolving this stuff, but it's definitely an issue should we have to deploy an intel formation today. Tied to this problem of equipment designed for the GWOT is what I'm saying there, aggressive commanders and UFRs. And what I mean by that is, well, you know, our maneuver commanders are not stupid. They know that the equipment that we currently have is not designed for their purposes. However, given that a lot of them have purchased stuff in order to try and make things, you know, to make their mission viable. Well, the fact of the matter is that's great and good that they're being aggressive on that front, but it often does screw up our long-term plans for the fielding of equipment inside these formations, as there's a lot of equipment that's been purchased around and no one is necessarily on the same equipment set. Lack of training environments, and this is a big one. Our training environments have not been set up for the type of fight that we have. So if we say we're going to a division echelon fight that employs the IW battalions, well, folks, at the moment, we don't have a CTC rotation that includes full IW battalions. Now, I'm definitely a CTC old hat myself, and we will say lots of stuff about how we are making division level rotations and supporting enablers like IW battalions in these rotations. Yep, that's great in theory, but the fact of the matter is we are not putting our commanders in the predicament that they will be in because our CTCs right now are not ready to accommodate the full division. So that hard question of if I have to GS my intelligence forces to cover the whole battle space, how am I going to do that? If I don't actually have 3 BCTs out there, I'm not putting the commander in that predicament. And and I'm also not putting that IW battalion commander in the predicament of how am I going to support these forces that are spread out over that kind of geographic area there. On top of that, one more point that I'll make out of that is we do not have the facilities yet or the support set up to do outside evaluation of these IW battalions. So if you're a maneuver commander, if you're an infantry battalion commander, you will go to the CTC and those OCs will be all up in your stuff, evaluating every bit of your performance there. And it's a high pressure event, but it's very good for the development of our leaders. If you're an IW battalion commander, there is no such element there. So while you might sort of support a warfighter or a CTC rotation, there is no OC equivalent, so a former battalion commander or G2, to get all up in your stuff and give you that kind of outside evaluation yet. So we're really failing our commanders in their development as of right now due to this lack of training environment. EW soldiers, I hit on this a little bit, but EW soldiers are part of our IW battalion formations, yet their branch is growing, of course, and they have the growing pains. So a lot of times we have EW soldiers in the formation, but no equipment for them. And then on top of that, we want to work together, but we have different knowledge sets. So a lot of times your EW soldiers have learned what they need to learn, but they don't know what the intel community knows. So they will be out there trying to do EW, and without breaking into classified, they will be risking their lives for stuff we in the intel community already know, and not putting their allocation where it really needs to be, because their leaders also don't know everything that we know in the intel community. And we'll move into this a little bit later when I talk about where we need to go in the future. But beware, though they're all great Americans, all of them are, we do not share the same knowledge sets. And it's on senior intel leadership to ensure that the leaders of these different formations are fully aware of what we have in our back pocket already, so that we do not risk soldiers' lives unnecessarily. Innovation cells. Here I hear all kinds of great things out of all these innovation cells we have across the Army. Oh, JSOC's got one. 82nd and 18th Airborne Corps got one. 513th's got an innovation cell. I believe there's one in the Pacific too, if I'm wrong. Hey, great. Awesome that you're doing all this work. But what my own observation would be from the ACOM FI front is they're doing a lot of good work and trying to incorporate civilian techniques into this, but because we have not built the foundation for this, they simply do not have tools to employ their innovation within intel formations. So a good example of this, everybody trying to do something right now, you'll hear something about their data science, data professional, data analysis plan that they have. But at the moment, we in the Army have not provided you with any tool to utilize data science techniques. There's no data science tools that are currently sitting on our SIPR networks there, or at least not within easy reach. This is a problem. It's great that we invested all this in your knowledge, but then that's all going to waste. And this is a failure of our formations that we need to get over here. Getting down to some of the other issues down there in the lower left. C2 fix, folks. I'm not sure if you guys are fully read on to C2 fix, but due to, the enemy constantly evolving in this, really a lot of our networks are vulnerable. And because of this, we cannot expect to have survivable command posts with constantly on networks at the echelons below division level. That's obviously the reality that we live in. However, whenever we design these formations, that was not a planning factor. So we are rapidly trying to change the situation that we're in order to meet the demands of C2 fix. But it's important for all of you folks that are going to be going into one of these formations to note that this C2 fix is going to have additional burdens on certain echelons. So if you're the lowest echelon that's going to have your constant upper tactical internet, and that is division, then you're going to have an added burden of packaging this intelligence data in such a way that can be passed down to your lower echelons over whatever means that they have. So we do not have our next gen mission command systems yet. So a lot of times what we're talking about is the good old standbys of tactical radio. We'll see what else comes to the front here as we're rapidly evolving on that as well. But there's a big problem. And if you're going to a division or an IW battalion that's supporting the division, this burden is going to fall on you. That's tied into the other two things, SIPRNet and bandwidth pipes. So SIPRNet's great. It's our tactical solution. But the problem with SIPRNet is we do not have the funding for tools on SIPRNet that we do on other networks. So there are amazing tools on the top secret network that are funded by the intelligence community, but your basic tactical warfighter doesn't have access to those throughout most of his or her day. And then the intelligence community, because they primarily operate on the TS level, they have no motivation to pay the extra money to make this available at SIPR and below. Army, a lot of the money that would go into SIPRNet type of stuff comes through the signal side of the house, and they really don't care about tools. They're only interested in hardening the network and making sure it's available, which really leaves us here in the intel world to push tools onto the SIPR level. And we do not, compared with the Intel community, do not have a huge amount of money to do that. And then none of that compares with the number of tools that are coming onto the unclassified side. So while I can pay thousands or millions of dollars for a tool, you know, some individual might be sitting on GitHub and writes a piece of code that makes that tool obsolete within a week or two. You know, it's just the world we live in. And bandwidth pipes are never going to be what you want. Obviously, our bandwidth pipes were designed for our previous era, and they're vulnerable. So while we may have great ideas about a data-driven future, we simply have not provided our formations with the bandwidth pipes that they need to make all this work perfectly. And then cross domains, obviously, you guys know these are a big issue for our formations. The ability to push data down from the top to the bottom is always a problem. Now, all these problems go, I want to try and give you guys a little bit of a thought from the ACOM FI perspective about what you need to do to prepare for this environment that we're going into over the next couple of years till we hit the full transition to our next generation technology. My story, really quick on this. Typical Army Intel officer. So I came in, you know, as a maneuver officer, went to the transition course, you know, after my first little deployment here at Huachuca. Then I found myself at Battalion S2, went on my first deployment during my first real deployment as an Intel officer, at least, during the surge in Iraq. Now, this was a rough deployment like it was for everybody else. We took a lot of casualties, but overall, I thought I did fine. Got out of that, went to OC for a little bit, and then I started an internship over at NSAS, a program that they've evolved now, but was called NSDP, or National Systems Development Program, back in the day. And once I got there, for the first time, I learned, wait a minute, there is a ton, an absolutely enormous amount of data that I needed, even as a little battalion level S2, that literally would have kept soldiers alive during my previous deployment. And nobody ever told me. Nobody gave me access to this. I had no ability to see it. I didn't even know it existed. And when I came to this realization as a little baby major, as an intern, I was extremely angry. And I am still extremely angry today. Now, whose fault is this? So this is an interesting question. At the time, you know, I was somewhat justifiably, but I was angry at Huachuca and the schoolhouse. How could you send us into this deployment and never mention any of the stuff that exists within the national intelligence community and not give us access to it there? Okay, that is part of it. But now that I've come to CEDID and come to the ACOM, there's another aspect to this, which is it's not just the schooling that is the problem there. Us in the capability management department have to understand some things. We have to understand who Americans are and American soldiers are as a people, and then plan our capabilities accordingly. And what I mean by that is Americans are not academics by nature. Obviously, we do have some there, but if you take a look at culturally who we value in society, you know, our most lofty individuals are not in academia or anything like that. But what Americans are and have always been from the beginning are tinkerers. If you give us things as Americans, we will figure things out with them. We will figure out ways to employ them and use them. I think this is really important, especially as you look at the more junior members inside intelligence formations. And one thing we failed at here as an Intel community, as an Army Intel community, is we did not give soldiers an environment where they could utilize, tinker with their tools, get their hands on Intel. Many, many years of the DSIGS program, especially, I think really killed off a full generation of analysts because we could not give them daily access to their tools so that they could figure out the best parts of this. When I write down there, what's an intelligence professional for? Folks, your commanders need intel. They do. And if you find yourself in a formation where you're doing something other than intel for most of your time, I, in the ACOM FI and the formations realm, want to know about that, and I want to figure out what we did wrong to make that happen. I've been in these formations several times where I spent 90% of my time doing something other than intel. That is not okay. We do not have enough Intel professionals around, and ACAM FI is interested in that anytime it happens. I have down there a little bullet called the raw data diet. Folks, if you cannot see Intel data on a normal, regular basis in its rawest form, then you are not developing yourself correctly. If we talk about things, if I'm relying on someone else to process my Intel data and give it to me there, I am not going to be successful for some of the reasons that I talked about before. Our formations, our data pipes, everything else is not designed for you to have this luxury at all times. If you are not looking at your Intel data coming in the rawest form, you're going to have a hard time. If you're relying on people, especially higher echelons, you're going to have a rough time. Weaponizing your curiosity. Now, one thing that I'll say for Huachuca, I don't mean to be critical of training or anything like that, because there's no way we could possibly train everybody in every tool that they need or everything that's available. But what we need to do is make soldiers who are curious, who cannot bear the fact that there is intelligence information out there that they cannot access. We need to weaponize their curiosity and make it so that they can be aggressive in their analytic efforts there. I am like this myself. I run queries every day, even as an old 06 with a capability development job. I am never going more than a day or two that I do not run queries on every AO, and that I also compare the queries that I'm getting with the joint tools that are also available on each network. Because if our Army tools are not looking as good as the Air Force or Navy or somebody else's, I'm simply not going to use them. And this is what we need to do throughout the folks that are running our intellectual base here at Huachuca. If you're not looking at your joint tools on an almost daily basis, you're becoming obsolete here. The thing that I'll tell you, and this is a depressing fact, I'm very hopeful for the future, but I'm now at about 26 years in the Army, and most of that as an S2 of some sort at some echelon there. And I have never utilized the Army program of record tools to do my day-to-day job. Every single era, I have utilized some kind of joint tool or something that was made available through the intelligence community. Now, I'm very hopeful for the future. I'm very hopeful for AIDP and some of the other things that we're currently developing. But that depressing fact is something that you got to keep in your mind and know that if it has gone on this long there, I've got to make myself knowledgeable on everything else as well, because I cannot afford to fall behind. And if you're here at Huachuca, you cannot afford to let the joint partners and everybody else developing tools become better than the Army on this. We need all the capabilities that they have and then some. So as far as my quick recommendations from the ACAM FI front here, preparing yourself for this weird environment that we're going in as we transition to the future Army there. Your daily routine. Folks, like I said, if you are not getting on to classified sources and running queries on a daily basis, you are falling behind. You are getting out of shape. It is no different than not doing PT for an extended period of time. Every week, I take a look, in addition to running queries, I take a look at AppsMall on JWICS and see what new tools have come into the forefront there. Because one thing that I'll say, if you think there are smarter people than you out there that are thinking about the Army Intel mission and especially the tactical Intel mission set, you are mistaken. There are not smarter people out there that are looking at this. They have no idea what you are doing as an Army Intel professional there. I spent a decent chunk of time as a technology integrator for the NRO and was amazed at the fact that these doctoral scientists with MIT degrees and everything like that didn't even know things like, nobody at the Army tactical level has an open JWICS pipe all the time. So this thing you're working on is completely worthless. They don't know this. If you are not doing it yourself there, they will not think of it. If you do not look at that tool that they're developing there and say, wait a minute, there is a relevance to me and my mission there, no one else is going to think of it. Knowledge sets. Folks, whatever your mission is, you are the smartest person in the Army on that particular mission. If you're a battalion S2, you've got 10K in front of you, or a brigade S2, you got 40K in front of you. You are the smartest person that there is on that particular AO. So be aggressive in your pursuit of data. The people above you do not know what you need. No way. Never. Tapping the pipe. This is a concept that I'll tell you about. And while we have to be, careful about classifications, if you think about how our data moves, once it comes to an intelligence professional who peds that data and makes a product out of it, a lot of times it becomes somewhat compartmentalized. Once I process something, it becomes SIGINT, and therefore you have to be in a certain place to access it. Same thing for OSINT, same thing for certain imagery products, things like that. However, if you tap that data in its rawest form, so you pull the broadcast itself, the raw passage of data from the collection asset to the end user there, there's virtually no data that you cannot tap at the SIPR level or the normal level that you will have as an intelligence professional. And this is another one. If any of you are interested, we can have more of a talk at the classified level sometime on how you do this. But what I would say is, if you're an intelligence professional and you're being aggressive in your mission there, tap the data at the closest to the source moment you can, because as it gets more processed, it's only going to get more compartmentalized. And as that happens, your ability to access it is going to get less and less. Data creeping. So folks, part of my job is to take a look at units and formations, see what they are doing right now from an intel perspective. Part of this is data creeping. I am going to look at your raw data every time. And the first thing is, if me as another intel professional, if I cannot access your raw data, you're already wrong. I already know you're jacked up there. So you would not believe how much compartmentalization there is of intel data throughout our intel formations. If you were to compare 500th, 513th, 201st, every one of them is storing their data in a different type of way. This is something that I think AIDP will get us beyond, but it's something that we have to stamp out culturally. So creep on the data. If I'm coming to your AO, you should pretty much expect that I already looked at your data in the rawest form that I can. And if I can't get to it, I'm already mad. You should be too. Void walking. Folks, there is a huge void in the Army intel between your tactical intelligence professionals and those that are in either the theater level and those that are sort of in support of the intelligence community. You have to go through all these areas during the course of your career development. And then whenever you have developed yourself on this, then you have to repeatedly reach between the voids between these elements to search for support. So don't be afraid. If you are a lowly battalion S2 at the lowest echelon where we give, feel free to reach directly to an NRO point of contact or an NSA point of contact or something like that. They cannot understand you and your particular need unless you talk to them. Don't be afraid. And I was always eager when I was in these other roles to hear from a lower echelon element that needed help. And then finally, using your skills. Folks, I know that a lot of you are in a situation where you're not producing intel products, especially at the classified level, on a regular basis. But look for that opportunity. Look for an excuse to delve under the classified side of the house for these things. One drill that I always do. Many, many times in my career, I've been in a situation where we were producing sort of an open source read book there. All right. These things make me cringe because lots of commanders like to read it, basically a news report or something like that. But that is not what an intelligence professional is for. If any idiot with a 4-year degree or something like that could do it for you, you are not being employed correctly as an intelligence professional. One battle drill that I always did for my elements was called Finding It in the Wild. So if you read a news article and the news article says something like, hey, the Chinese have developed this new supersonic something missile or something radar or something, they're cool. And it's great. You can read that to your commander, but anybody could do that. But if you're an intelligence professional, you should be able to find that in the wild. So find its collection parameters, find how you would see this thing if you were looking at it through one of our intelligence tools, and then present that to your commander. And even if, and there are lots of times where you're not in an environment where you can put this kind of classified data forward there. It's okay. You can always tell it to your commander. You are always in that kind of relationship where you can give it to him through your own knowledge there. So don't worry about it if I don't have a TS workspace or a classified workspace. There is always a way to convey this information. But what I will always say to it, if you're doing something that any other smart individual can do, you are not being employed properly as an intelligence professional. And that I want to change from the ACOM-FI perspective. Also, know what you are worth and what people have given you, what your birthright is as an intelligence professional. People bigger than the Army declared that you have access to top secret data and secret data there as an intelligence, as a 35 series here. So if you find yourself in a job where simply by logistics or some other, unreasonable situation, you don't have access to this, well, you got to fight and change that. Be aggressive to find a way to access this. People bigger than any commander you're going to have decided that you should have that access and made you a soldier with those clearances. Therefore, you need to exercise them. And again, if you're in a situation where you're not getting that, ACOM-FI wants to know. I want to know because I want to find a way to change your structure in such a way that we can get you what you need, because we have no intelligence professionals to waste. All right. That's sort of my take and my philosophy, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has on this.
Sir, thank you very much. And actually, there's two questions in the chat, and I'll read you off the first one. The first question is from Captain Daldil, and he stated, "Sir, in ACOM-FI, how quickly are you able to implement change or refine their process to see organizations putting into effect?"
Okay, so again, I'm going to give you the standard Intel answer, which is it depends on that. So when it comes to changes there, we can do a lot for aggressive implementation of new technology into your formations, and we can do on a rapid basis changes to let's call it the distribution of your soldiers. And what I mean by that is, while I can't give you more, everybody's going to want more all the time there. If we have an analysis that says, wait a minute, this formation, what they need more than anything is more GEOINTers, and what we don't need is more whatever, hey, we have 3 tangos here and we have no intel equipment here. We could easily trade 3 for 3 there. That kind of thing can be done at a rapid pace. And even with certain memos, we can make that happen like by your next deployment. So within your life cycle there. But we're also more interested here from CDID and what our role is. We're more interested in that talking point. So that thing that we found, hey, this formation doesn't need these kind of people. They need these kind of people there. And then we'll put it into the next conceptual formation and then have it out in the next RStruct, which are usually three to 4 years on that. But yeah, sadly, it depends.
Good copy. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you answering his question. There's another question in the chat, sir. This is from Captain Prony with the 189th Infantry Brigade out of JBLM. And his question is, how should units transitioning to the IEW battalion formation develop their training plans to enable their transformation?
Yeah. So as far as the training plans go, especially for the ones that are going through, that are being evaluated by 189th, I'm not sure exactly the cycle of where they're going to be as far as the equipment fielding for them. But what I would say is, think about what I said when you're developing your training plans. You know the environment that you're going into. That IEW battalion is going to be the sole intel element in a real formation. So think when you have your training, first of all, if the unit still has its BCT MICOs, I kind of recommend they not participate, go away, or be employed somehow else. Because as the IW battalion, you have got to figure out how to get your hooks into those BCTs without the benefit of that MICO. How are you going to pass the data back and forth with just the communications tech that you each have? So think about that. I would say for every bit of training that you do, make sure that dissemination piece to your whatever echelon you're supporting. I mean, it'll be a division, but to an element below you is thought through. So if your training stops with intel soldiers, then you're not ready yet for what you need to do. And then, oh, by the way, one thing I forgot to mention too is, while it might be logical to think that, hey, because we're reducing BCT MICOs, that brigade and battalion S2 shops should be stronger in order to accommodate their ability to pull this. That's not the case. They are under the same pressure as everyone else. So there will be less intel professionals in these BCT2 shops and less in these battalion 2 shops. So make sure that you're taking that into account whenever you go to the dissemination piece of your training. And then, one other thing that I would say, and this is tough for some folks based on the tech that's available at their training locations, but if you cannot get your folks on the real world systems with regularity daily, then you're going to have a rough time. At the minimum right now, I'd recommend that your soldiers have AIDP accounts and can at least access AIDP daily before they go there. That is where all your stuff has to flow for the future. So if they don't have accounts, and oh, God forbid, if they don't even have SIPR tokens, then it's time to start throwing people off balconies or something like that.
Good copy. Thank you, sir. And then Captain Peroni, did he answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, as I said in my comment, we have a unit that's transitioning to that IEW formation. It's 250th MI Battalion. Yeah, they're just asking for any sort of guidance on how to develop their training plan, and that's exactly what we were looking for, sir. Thank you.
And there's another question from Chief Dan Furman. Chief, would you like to just ask your question, or do you want me to read it off?
I can do it. Hey, sir. I used to be the Deputy Chief of Plans at Joint Staff J2 as a Fed. I've worked very closely with the Combat Command's combat support agencies and OSD on the Combat Command's integrated priority list, their IPLs. I rarely saw any of the intel, let alone Army intel capability gaps come up to Joint Staff. How can we bridge this gap so we can bring these gaps up to bring it up to awareness to the combat commanders, the chairman, and then gain senior leader prioritization and advocacy? Over.
Yeah, this is one that I think is actually getting a little better. And the reason why it's getting better is our joint partners, as well as the national agencies, are realizing that they cannot do it alone. That really, especially given some of the technological advancements, that a lot of the things we've relied on for collection are vulnerable, without getting too specific here. But a lot of things we've done. The Army, because we had the benefit of being on the ground and very survivable in these circumstances, a lot of these joint partners have realized that, wait, I need the Army to do these things. And therefore, we can put our gaps for things like long range sensing and the like up there. And they're getting more attention now. And then the other thing that I like to do, if I were in charge of all things, is we've got to create a culture where we destroy situations where we are isolated on our own networks and not joint networks. So things like this. One thing that disgusted me all the time: if we are on, for example, a communications, like a chat that is only available to the Army, what the heck are we doing? And every time I see transverse chat being utilized off a local server, I'm like, oh my God, what is it, 1996? What are we doing? But what that means is, because we're isolated on our own networks there, we cannot socialize our problems with our joint partners there, nor can we share our data in such a way with the joint partners there that they can see our use and utility. And then again, while I was ranting against DSIGs, for the data that we have produced traditionally, so our bottom-up intel data that has gone there, with the exception of some of the SIGINT type of stuff, a lot of our stuff never escaped an Army network on a hard stack that we were utilizing for a particular geographic AO. So a lot of our folks did not actually understand what the Army could bring to the fight here regarding our intelligence data. I think that's going to go away, especially as we get more and more advanced capability. People are going to want our stuff, especially for those fights where they are not survivable and we might be. But I think it's getting better, but it's definitely still a problem for sure. Over.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, there's one question from one of the chapter members of ROX here at Huachuca, and the question is there any anticipation or or a impending shift, if you will, expected within either doctrine, organizations, training, or the rest of the facets within the .mil-PS spectrum that would be critical to ensuring the Army intelligence capabilities remain at the cutting edge in order to be responsive to the Army of 2030?
Okay, so there are a couple. So there are folks that are advocating for new means of technological development throughout our force. So lots of people that want to embrace sort of agile principles, other things coming from the civilian world for the rapid development of technology into the force. That's great, but there are problems with that, obviously. So if you take a look, due to the fact that we as the Army do not control a lot of the information that we rely on, there are checks and balances, bureaucratic procedures for the integration of any kind of this data or any tool that's going to utilize this kind of data. And therefore, while these things are well-meaning and might work well in the civilian world, a lot of them are not working great yet for the Army. We're trying to be faster and more agile within our traditional methods for .mil-PFP integration. So we need programs of record to be designed in such a way that we know they're going to evolve quickly. So that's why if you take a look at the systems we have coming online, most of them, we're trying to make the majority of their components a software-based thing. So if you look at AIDP, this will continue to evolve. If you look at the gears, the bots that are inside our Titan, these will continue to evolve. Hopefully our future pieces, like our future edge nodes, our future cross domains, will be primarily software-based that we can push onto any particular piece of hardware that is made available by the unit. So we're trying to do a better job on that, but there's still an Army slow bureaucratic process for a lot of these things. And it's necessary. We need a formal method to make programs of record throughout the Army. A lot of times, like I was ranting briefly, but if you look at some of the things that people have acquired, if you look at Maven, if you look at some of the different SIGINT and EW systems that are being pushed there, they're awesome. But the full integration of these systems into our Army systems sort of falls apart, especially when we look to integrate with somebody outside of the intelligence realm. So we do still want to push on our formal processes here. But yeah, it's a little rough, but all I'm trying to say is we definitely need our formal capability development process to remain in place as we look at and dabble with things like agile methodologies and other things coming from the civilian realm. Over.
Good copy. Thank you for the response, sir. And also, Colonel Benbenek is also in violent agreement with your statement as well too. And she sends her kudos in the chat as well as being one of our chapter members here at Fort Huachuca. Ladies and gentlemen, we're approaching the very end of our session. We have time for maybe one more question. Are there any additional questions for Colonel Hartung at this time? I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Nobody's coming up on the mic. Okay. So sir, I just wanted to take this time to say thank you very much for your very insightful discussion. I know as one of your counterparts at ACM Foundation, I truly appreciate these engagements, and I think that the participants today enjoyed it as well. We truly evaluate your time, and then on behalf of General Hale as well as General Harding, thank you very much for carving out time out of your extremely busy schedule in order to develop our teammates as well as our partners who are currently on the net as well as across the enterprise. So again, on behalf of Huachuca Rocks Incorporated, it's been a distinct pleasure and honor to host you today. And on behalf of Faithful Nation, thank you for your continued service, and thank you for having this excellent discussion with us.
Oh, thanks much. And if any of you guys are interested in anything or delving more into the classified side of some of the things I mentioned, feel free to reach out. ACM FI, that's what we're here for, to integrate and try and solve your problems there. So thanks a lot, Fred.
Anytime, sir.